My name is Akolisa Ufodike, one of the gubernatorial aspirants for the Anambra State primaries of the PDP upcoming elections, upcoming primaries on the 26th of August. Last Friday, I was disqualified from the primaries for the reason that I was a dual citizen. It's my pleasure to announce that we appealed that decision of the screening committee. And on Tuesday, yesterday, I was cleared and I'm back in the race. I'll add a few other remarks and then I'll take some questions from members of the press. First question, which I've received, I guess, since my disqualification. There's been a strong outpouring of support from across the globe, frankly, Nigerians all over the world, including in Nigeria, who encouraged me to appeal the decision because it was flawed. The good news is that the appeal committee agreed with us. I guess that's evidence that the democratic process itself works within the party, where stronger arguments and factual arguments prevail. And with that incidents behind us, we're back in the race and looking forward to a strong and competitive showing over the next week and a half. About me, that's the other question I've received. Who's this dark horse and where did he show up from? I've been active, internationally with the party in Canada since 2006. This is my first time, I guess, being the face of a candidacy here in Nigeria. I come to the race with 25 years of industry experience from investment banking, consumer packaged goods, telecoms. My last role was as Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer for the largest, one of the largest, wireless internet service providers in Canada. My belief is that I can port some of those learnings and experience over the last 20 years back and be of service to my state. I've been asked several times why I'm running, and it's really that simple. Quite often we've outsourced the reason for the lack of participation by the youth in politics to the elder generation and said they've not allowed us to participate. While some of that remains true, the reality is we have also failed to get involved in the political process. And if my candidacy, next time there's an election, regardless of geographical lines in Zamfara State, Ebonyi State, Adamawa State, if my candidacy encourages a lot more who look like this demographic to take part in the process, then I think the candidacy would have been worth something. We're going to be very competitive over the next week and a half. I'm heading to Oka as soon as I'm done speaking to you gentlemen and ladies. And we're going to go battle for that candidacy and show that indeed, if we're not too young to lead in industrial sectors like I have, we're not too young to run as well. The last thing I'll add before I take questions is this word goes out to anyone who's a dual citizen out there. I really do hope that I'm the last candidate, irrespective of party lines, that has to go through the brouhaha of the last couple of days. The Constitution does not disqualify dual citizens from running for office. The provisions of 182 also apply, believe it or not. There's a similar provision for all elected offices. So for the Senate, for the House of Reps, for the State House of Reps. The precedence for that case is PDP versus Ajimobi. So if you're ever, if you're running irrespective of party lines, this now has to do with people who are looking to serve their country, and anyone else should try and tell you that there's two classes of Nigerians, please refer them to that case. And I believe there's a lot that I bring to the table, different perspective on certain things, the ability to stand credibly before foreign markets, foreign investors, and foreign dignitaries, and make a case in the same language that they understand that Anambra is viable, that Nigeria is viable. The last words I'll add, I guess I did say the last one was the last word, so I owe you 5 minutes of your life back if I go over that. But the last thing I'll add is, there's an opportunity here for the PDP to put a check mark right there in next to Anambra State. And we can ride that wave into the presidential elections come 2019. You all saw the revival out last Saturday at Eagle Square. I believe it was a lot more boisterous than even when the party was in power. People are motivated. There's a lot of disillusionment out there. And I think PDP has the opportunity to harness some of that anger, harness some of that dissatisfaction. But we have to get it right in Anambra State. irrespective of the outcome, we'll be putting our full support behind whatever nominee the party delegates decide to go with, because it's crucial that we win the state and we can ride that momentum going into the 2019 presidential elections. So I sit on the board of the Canadian Nigerian Chamber of Commerce. I've been a founding member of that board since 2010. Through that period, we've been at the center of economic and commercial conversations between Canada and Nigeria. We're part of the folks that facilitated the meeting in 2013 or 2012, pardon me, when Namadi Sambo, as vice president, came to Canada with, I believe it was 8 sitting governors and 6 sitting ministers. A lot of trade came out of that. I mean, I wouldn't get into the details. In terms of what else I've been doing, in the last 7 years, since 2010, this is my 47th trip to Nigeria. I'm co-founder of a company called Kainji Resources. It's one of those companies that's been permitted to build a modular refinery in Imo State. That's us deploying our own capital. That's us and getting Canadians to deploy their own capital here in Nigeria, because it's been clear to me since 2010 that I was on a trajectory, I guess, back to transitioning back to Nigeria. So we've made gains in the industrial sector. We're looking to bring some of those skills back now to public service. One of the things I could do differently, certainly in Anambra State, is address the issue of security. I haven't given you folks enough of my background, but I will send you some materials on myself. I'm a graduate of the Nigerian Military School, Zaria, and also went to the Nigerian Defense Academy as a member of 39 Corps. So my classmates are brigadier generals in the Army. There's a reason why military administrations start their day with security briefings, because once you get it wrong on security, everything else falls apart. Some of the most serious challenges we've been facing in Anambra State right now are all, I guess, problems that derive from the perception and the state of security in that state. So we need to get that right. That's one of the things where the current administration's failed. I'm not here to toot the governor's successes. That's his role to do. But I can tell you that in terms of commercial success and trying to encourage further industrialization in Anambra, that will be at the forefront of being able to have credible conversations with foreign investors and frankly trying to incentivize them to look at not just Nigeria, but Anambra specifically. I have an 8-point agenda, and the one that relates the most to industrialization is attracting an automobile and small-scale manufacturing EPZ to Anambra State. It's amazing that a state that has the likes of Innocent, that produces more spare parts and sells more spare parts than any one of us can imagine. There's been no move towards trying to, bring all of that knowledge and all of that talent into a certain area from where we can serve the sub-region, but frankly serve the rest of the subcontinent. So that's one of the things I have on my 8-point agenda, trying to provide infrastructure that enables the further spread of industrialization in Anambra State, specifically when it comes to manufacturing and the automobile sector. I'm also a bit of a closet academic. I went to the University of Calgary where I did my PhD. Through my career, at some point in time, I was academic chair. That's a fancy way for a head of department. I was the head of department in the largest and the oldest trade school in Canada. During that time, we also facilitated discussions between the Ministry of the Niger Delta and SAIT in looking at providing curriculum for some of the trade schools, regarding welding and things of that nature, the service support services that are needed in the oil patch. That, those conversations went sideways, did not progress. But having said that, we've got the relationships. Given the fact that, right now I do have a tenure position with a school called McEwan University. So we are active in Canada. We've got the relationships with the educational sector. And I also have, restoring the education sector in Anambra back to its past glory as one of my agenda items on my 8-point agenda. At the time I went to high school in 1982, there was 19 states. And there was the sense that certain states were a lot more competitive. If you were from my state, as an example, Anambra State, it was a lot tougher to get into NMS because there was just 3 spots. And when you're competing with everybody else who's a straight A student, then you end up where, it's sort of the best that even gets an opportunity. It's really sad what's happened to the state of education in Anambra over the last few years. Teachers getting unpaid, and as that's, and after a while you have this systemic rot that then starts to affect how students, the quality of the education students receive, and the quality of, I guess, the educational experience that parents on the other end, receive as well, vicariously through their kids, and the amount of effort parents now have to put in to try to ensure that their students even stay, competitive in class. In my case, education will be a priority. I got into high school when I was 8. I was a product of the double promotion system, so I spent 3 years in primary school, primary 1, 3, and 5, and then I went to high school. I left high school, NMS Zaria, when I was 13. I got into university when I was 13. So I understand what it takes to develop bright minds and try and ensure that they're equipped to succeed in the future. Education will be one of my key priorities in Anambra State, and we will restore it back to the glory days. When you go through the process of trying to get a refinery permitted, which we did in Imo State, rest assured, you don't do that without rolling up your sleeves, rolling up your shoes, and getting as far deep into the grassroots as any one of my competitors in this race. Like I mentioned, over the last 7 years, we worked through that process. The refinery site is in Imo State, so maybe 70, 80 flights into Owerri. Every time I'm in Owerri, I'm heading to Nnewi. I deal with my business regarding the refinery, and I end up in Nnewi. My candidacy, frankly, wasn't my idea. This was the idea of the grassroots. In all of those visits and the time I spent in Nigeria, over the last year, it's been a month on, a month off. So I'm not transient. I'm not here as a visitor. I live here. I come here and I spend a full month, and then I go visit my family, and then I'm back in a month. Through that time, we've heard from the people. And it was through those consultations that it became apparent that if I was to run for office in Nigeria, I would be able to influence the outcomes people experience by an order of magnitude, more so than in Canada, as an example, where things work the way they should. So to address the question in terms of what have I done with the grassroots, those are my constituents. My candidacy wasn't my idea. I'm not running because I need a day job or because I need a second job. Like I said, I haven't switched party affiliations. If this go round were not successful, God forbid, I'm not switching to any party because I really need to be a governor or really need to be a politician. This is about service. The other thing I'll then address is the first question, which is slightly more complicated. Part of my agenda, and I will come back to that 8-point agenda, includes trying something that's never been tried. You need to, it starts with theory. You need to think, and then you act, and then you go to practice, right? Because what we've done over the last few years is we go straight to practice, right? It's trial and error. And we'll do it first, and then when it fails, then we don't think of what next to do, we just do the next thing. In this case, there has to be some intellect that goes into it, some thinking, some strategizing, and if it's done correctly, we can then go out and execute. So here's what I've got in terms of fixed infrastructure in Anambra State. We're going to try something that's never been done. Anambra State will float a sovereign wealth fund. We've got relationships with the likes of Mubadala that will try and deploy in Nigeria to replicate the sovereign wealth fund model at the state level. And the key projects that we'll be looking to invest in will be infrastructure in nature to try and provide I talked about the EPZ as an example. You don't just tell people. I've seen a lot of states purporting to be implementing EPZs, and there's no road, there's no water, there's no light. That's not an EPZ, that's bush. We are looking to implement a project that will have an infrastructure that will have infrastructure base that attracts development to it. And at the same time, the state itself will be willing to risk its own capital to ensure that further infrastructure investments come in. So including roads, including potential IPPs with power generation, and potentially including, some of them might mean tolling, including potentially a tech hub. But the state ultimately will look to go to the markets, risk its balance sheet, try and raise financing that it can come along and co-invest with people that are looking to do business in Anambra State. I actually look to the future. I look instead to the fact that I was requalified, right? So disqualified and requalified. I mean, over the weekend, I got introduced as the gentleman that got disqualified. So I hope when you go out of here, you introduce me as the gentleman that was requalified.